So thanks for coming. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
I got to ask you one question, though.
Okay.
And I always ask this because doing radio and interviewing guys like you, looking back over your career, what is one thing that kind of pops up? Is it a life and death, or is it what? Thinking back, was it a win you possibly had?
It really wasn't things like winning tournaments and everything. All that's cool and all that's important, but my best memories of fishing and even considering tournaments and everything. My wife fished Bass and Gal for 23 years and won 7 Angler of the Year titles and 4 or 5 classics and about 25 boats. She win the boats and I would sell them, so that's a pretty good deal. But it's most of the memories are with the kids and fishing and some of the tournaments that they fished in and of course Chris. So it's really and truly sort of never been about me. It's always been about them.
Well,
so
that was
that's good. That's good.
Perfect answer. It's getting kids outside and fishing with your wife.
Absolutely.
Good job. See you.
If you teach your kids how to fish, you get them out fishing hunting, you don't have to worry about them getting involved in drugs or anything like that, because they ain't got any money left. They spend all their money on fishing and hunting gear. You ain't got any money left to buy drugs. Somebody come up and try to sell them some drugs. I'm sorry about that. I'm saving up to buy a new rod and reel. How much you say saving up? I got $48. How much a rod and reel? $412. But I'm saving to buy that rascal. Sell those drugs to somebody else. Hey, it's great to be here, man. We're having 80-degree weather in Oklahoma. And so if I want to give you all the best fishing tip in the world that you can get right now for this time of the year, right now, get in your truck, drive 800 miles south. Look for blue on that map. Look for blue. You see blue, pull over that, start fishing. You're going to catch them. You're going to catch them. But it is good to be here. I came up here yesterday. I had a short day, short night's sleep the night before, very little sleep last night. Now I get up this morning and I have a backlash to toilet paper right off the bat. You ever had a day start like that? That's a bad way to start right there. But I think that I've had that problem over my lifetime. I had a few backlashes in the toilet paper, and I always thought we ought to develop a fisherman's toilet paper rack, and have like little magnets on it, like these reels do, a little tension on the end. So you get in there after you've had a really long, hard night, you get ready, grab that thing, crank that thing up a little bit, rip that out of there. No backlash. That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Yeah. Toilet paper is the important thing. I've even got a toilet paper rack in my Ranger boat. That's right, $130,000 Ranger boat. And everybody notices that I've got a toilet paper rack in there. And that's something, it's cool. You got to have it, though. You got to have it. Hunters, hunting, you got to have it, too, right? You got any deer hunters in here? Y'all deer hunt? You take toilet paper to the woods with you? Yeah, you got to take toilet. What color of toilet paper do you take?
Well, it used to be orange.
Orange? Well, somebody said white?
Well, normally white, yeah.
White toilet, you take white toilet paper. What are you hunting? White-tailed deer. That's kind of a bad combination when you think about it.
It ain't so bad when you're in the blind.
Being the blind.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. What about the other guy's blind? And you get ready, you break some of that white toilet paper out there in the woods. You break that white toilet paper out. Here comes Bubba, half blind, walking through the woods. Sees that white toilet paper. Oh, there's one of them big deer looking the other direction. Can you imagine? That's dangerous. It's dangerous. Can you imagine what he's going to think? Boom, shoots you right there. Walks over there and he goes, oh, my God, this is terrible. Oh, my gosh. Oh, it's only a one-pointer. All right, what were we supposed to talk about today? I apologize for all that, guys. I haven't told that story in a long time, but for some reason it just popped into my mind. But you do not want to start a day having a backlash of the toilet paper. I think we ought to have Jimmy Houston toilet paper rack. We'll have a camo paper, orange. That's a good idea. I'm from Oklahoma, though. I'm a University of Oklahoma guy. Orange makes me want to throw up. It's like Texas is orange. Yeah. You know why Texas is orange? They get most of their football players out of the state prison down there. If they're used to wearing that orange, that's right, they get them on. And now they're giving them $5 million a year to change that from an orange prison suit to an orange University of Texas suit. That's a really bad deal. But anyway, I think what we're supposed to talk about today, and we talked about it, was anybody here last night when we did a seminar last night? We had one. You're a glutton for punishment, but thank you for coming back. we talked about this a little bit last night because we kind of got to rambling, talked about a lot of things. But by the way, when I'm talking, if anybody has a question about anything, don't worry about it. Just raise your hand and ask it. I mean, even if it's something I'm not talking about, it doesn't make any difference, you know. So whatever that you're kind of wondering about or that I'm talking about, just raise your hand and ask it. We'll try to answer that question. But what we had scheduled to talk about on this Saturday morning session here is the 4 criteria that you use to make your decisions in fishing. Fishing is all a decision-making game. The better decisions you can make, the better fisherman you're going to become, and the more fish you'll catch. And honestly and truly, we all know more about bass fishing than we normally use out there in a day's fishing. For some reason, we just don't use what knowledge we have. And most all of you in here, whether you've been fishing for, a year or 50 years, know a lot more about bass fishing or walleye fishing or whatever you're fishing for than you really think you do. And the key to catching fish is to make the right decisions. And you make literally hundreds and hundreds of decisions every day when you're bass fishing, when you're walleye fishing, when you're crappie fishing. You're making decisions on every individual cast. Where to throw the lure, how to move your rod tip when it's coming back, speed of retrieve, the depth. I mean, you make a lot of decisions on every cast. And that's one reason why men like to fish a lot, because men can go fishing and make all the decisions all day long. They make them all. It don't even matter if they're wrong. Nobody's going to bitch at them. I mean, nobody's going to complain. Yeah, you get to make, and most married men don't get to make too many decisions. We get to make really important decisions like what age you're going to retire at. But little decisions like what kind of truck you drive and what kind of house you live in and where you're going to eat tonight, all that kind of stuff, you let your wife make those little decisions. But anyway, you're making decisions. And the key to making good decisions is really based on only 4 criteria. That's all. And these criteria are so important that honestly, I believe you need to write them down and put them on top of your tackle box. Table at the top of your tackle box. And when you're having trouble out there catching fish, anybody ever go fishing, fish 2 or 3 hours and not get a bite? Anybody ever do that? Yeah, we do that a lot. We do that all the time. And so we do that. If you and I go out there and we fish 2 or 3 hours, we get a bite. And I say, hey, we need to do something different. What do you think we ought to do different? We need to do something different even if it's wrong. We need to do something different because we're not catching any fish. And so you say, well, let's try this or let's do whatever. You come up with something that we need to do that's different. And most of the guys I fish with, when I ask them that question, they say, well, you tell me what we're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be the pro in this, dude. I can't believe we fished 2 hours and we ain't got a bite. I'm going to go fish with Hank Parker or somebody, And I said, well, if you fish with Hank Parker, you fish a week and you wouldn't have caught one. Yeah. Y'all know who Hank Parker? Anybody y'all know who Hank Parker? Yeah, he's one of my really good buddies. Hank Parker, honestly, I know he doesn't look it, but Hank Parker's actually younger than I am. I know you can't tell by looking, and Hank Parker, all his life has made fun about my hair until about the last 7 or 8 years. Hank don't make hair jokes anymore. He quit making those hair jokes. He buys Rogaine by the gallon. Gallon jugs of Rogaine. That's right. Puts it in a pan, sticks his whole head in there and gargles with it. Still don't help. Still don't help. But decision making is a really important deal. And here's the deal. You go out there and go fishing, and if you fish tournaments, anybody in here fish tournaments of any kind? When you ever fish tournament and not done very good in it? And yet, what happens when you go to the weigh-in? Somebody's caught them. Somebody's usually set, and you go, God, dogs, I can't believe how that happened out there. How'd they catch them? I couldn't even hardly get a bite. Look at that big string of fish. They could come up there, can't hardly carry them all. And if it's walleye fishing, they got lead weights in them. But, you don't do that bass fishing. Don't do it. Wasn't that a terrible deal? They ought to hung those guys. They should have, yeah. But it's a felony in the South in most all the states to cheat in the bass tournament. It's a felony. It puts you in prison for a long time, cheating in the bass tournament. Now, you can kill somebody. You get away with that, but, you cheat in the bass tournament, you're going to jail. That's all there is to it. But tournaments will teach you that they're biting. You can catch them. There's some fish that can be caught because even when you have a bad day, there's somebody, and usually several somebodies, that's had a really good day. You simply made the wrong decisions. And then the other part of that deal is when you go that way in and you haven't done very good and you talk to one of your buddies and he's up there in second or third place or winning or whatever, and he tells you how he caught them, what pattern he was using, how he was doing it. He tells you how he did it, and you go, God, dogs, I know that, but you didn't do it. You didn't make the right decision. So these 4 criteria that I'm going to give you right now, like I said, I think they're so important you need to write them on a piece of paper, tape them on your tackle box, tape them on the dash of your boat or whatever. And when you're having a tough time out there, you look at those and you think of what you know about those particular criteria and how it would affect your fishing, and you will come up with some answers to that deal. What do we do now? We're not catching anything. Well, you need to do something different. What do we do? It will give you those answers automatically. It's just like almost a magic formula that really, really works. One of them is the type of lake you're fishing. What type of lake you're fishing? Y'all have here in Wisconsin and most of this area up here in the north, mostly God-made lakes. They're natural lakes, God-made lakes. In the south where I live in Oklahoma and all over the south, with the exception of Florida, we have mostly man-made lakes. We dam up rivers and creeks and we make a lake. We make a man-made lake. So that's just an easy example there, the type of lake. You don't fish man-made lakes the same as you fish God-made lakes. They're totally different type. You fish rivers, you fish streams, you fish brackish water where you have rivers that run into salt water, and so where it mixes, it's brackish. You can catch, like down in South Louisiana, you can catch redfish and grouper and flounders and stuff, the same place you're catching black bass and crappie. Same place. The saltwater fish are mixing in with there where the freshwater fish are, brackish water. Obviously, you don't fish that the same as you do freshwater or saltwater. So the type of water you're fishing. And so you make that one thing you think about when you're having trouble. What do I know about a man-made lake? What do I know about a God-made lake? Another thing is what the water is doing at the time that you're fishing it. Water is always doing something. Well, up here, it's mostly just sitting there, frozen solid. But you know, even I mean, how many? Most of y'all probably ice fish, hadn't you? About everybody ice fish. Not many ice fishermen. Yeah, I've actually ice fished in Wisconsin, up around. I fished Winnebago Lake up by Fond du Lac, and Green Lake up there. You know, and when I went ice fishing, nearly everybody I went ice fishing is falling through the ice. Nearly everyone. Is anybody falling through the ice here? See, why do you keep going back and do that? If you did, it seemed like one time you learn your lesson. But and so I went ice fishing, and I was talking to these guys at dinner and stuff the night before. They were talking about falling through or driving their four-wheeler out there and their four-wheeler falling through and stuff like that. And so we get out there to go ice fishing, and I looked off out there in the middle of the lake, and I saw what looked like some lumber or something way out there. And we walked like a mile out on the middle of Green Lake to fish about 60 feet deep, try to catch trout, you know, and so I looked out there and there was this wood thing looking out there. And I said, what is that wood deal out in the middle of that lake? And they said, oh, that's a pier come off a boat dock. It broke off of a boat dock. I said, how in the world did I get out there in the middle of that ice like that? I said, well, we carried it out there. I said, what for? So there's a crack out there. There's a crack in the ice out there, and we got it where you could walk across that crack. I said, there's a crack in the ice out there, 60-foot deep water, and we're going to walk across that little. Have you ever heard of walking the plank? Those people die when they walk the plank. That's what they do. And we're walking the plank. It didn't make much sense. So I looked around, and we had one guy with us. His name was Tiny. He's about like this guy's size. And I thought, I'm going to skip behind Tiny. I'm going to walk behind Tiny. Tiny disappears. I'm going back to the bank. Real easy deal. So that's what I did, ice fishing. But even in water that's got ice on it, it's still doing something. You know, ice melts from the bottom. And the top still looks the same, but as the ice goes away, it's getting thinner and thinner from the bottom. It does that because the sunshine's shining through that ice, and you have what I call a windshield effect. The warmest water is right underneath that ice. Sort of don't make sense. We put ice in water to make the water cold, but that ice right below it, that water is the warmest right there because that sun's shining down through it. And it sort of which it melts that ice from the bottom. If you're bass fishing, bass will get right up underneath that ice when it gets really thin, and they're having that windshield effect. They come down there, and about the first week or 10 days or so when you have ice out, you can catch bass up shallow. They're still up shallow. Now, they'll move back out deep. They won't stay there. But for about a week, they stay up shallow when you have ice out. But water's always doing something. It's rising, it's lowering, you have a lot of current, not much current. Man-made lakes in the south, one of the big deals that we do in man-made lakes in the south is they generate power with those lakes. Most of those lakes were built for power, not for fishing, for electric power. So when they turn those generators on down at the dam, you have a current go through that lake. So that's what the water's doing, so it's very important to you. If you're running generators, running a current, so if we fish man-made lakes, we pay attention to the generation schedule. And when it's really effective is in summertime, and they're running at generators a lot because of creating a lot of electricity for air conditioning. So, but those things are important to you. The water's getting clearer, it's getting muddier, it's getting warmer, it's getting colder. The pH is changing in it, the oxygen's changing. The thermocline that you can see on your fish locator, the thermocline is moving up and down. Water is always doing something. Learn what you can about what the water's doing. There's a lot of things you know about the water's doing, even if you haven't been fishing very long. There's a lot of things that you know about it. Like in the springtime, this time of the year, we hit right now, we start having 60-degree nights, 80-degree days. What's going to happen? The lake's going to get warmer every day. It's 80-degree day and then gets down to 30 at night for 2 or 3 nights. It's warmer during the day, colder at night. That affects how we fish. If in Oklahoma right now, if I was to go out on a lake in Oklahoma and let's say it's 80 degrees today, we had a big bad cold front come through, it's 30 tonight. That water yesterday got warmer. During the night, it got colder. So we would fish that day differently because of it. You see what I'm talking about? So whatever you know about what the water is doing. So with the type of lake you're fishing, what the water is doing when you're fishing it. Use those things in your decisions. So if we're doing the analogy like I made it, okay, what do we do now? That's what you think about, what type of lake we're fishing, what the water's doing. So that'll begin to give you answers to what do we do now? What do we do now? That'll begin to give you some answers. The other thing that you want to think about besides the type of lake and what the water's doing at the time is what the weather is doing. What the weather is doing. Weather affects fish a lot. Now, it affects them so much, and fish are cold-blooded animals. I don't guess they're even an animal if you go back to the species of species. But anyway, they're cold-blooded. And that's why those big female bass are so hard to catch. They're females, they're cold-blooded, cold-blooded. We watch those crime shows on TV and women always killing their husbands. Cold-blooded, cold-blooded. But warm heart, they have a warm heart. As long as you treat them good, they're not going to kill you. If you don't, you're out of here. But they're cold-blooded, so they're really, really affected by the water. Their body temperature adjusts to the water temperature. So we pay attention to to the weather. What's going on in the weather. It gets cloudy. It clears up. We have fronts coming in. Barometers going up. Barometers going down. Temperature changes throughout the day. All the things that the weather affects the fish in a big way. So the problem that we're having, we fished 2 or 3 hours, we hadn't caught any fish. We add that in. And what do we know about the weather? Well, today we come out here and is clear blue skies, and now we got some clouds rolling in. All right, what do we know about fishing? No matter what we're fishing for, that the fish that they're affected by the clouds. And then the last thing you need to know about is the time of the year. So those 4 criteria there are where you make all of your decisions. All of your decisions about fishing, those 4 criteria. And it doesn't matter whether you know a lot about fishing or you don't know very much. You know some answers in all of those categories. And the problem that we have in fishing is we tend to make our decisions by sort of the first solution or answer that pops into our mind. Yeah. Well, I know why we're not catching any fish, Jimmy. It's clear blue sky. We need to move out to deeper water because of that blue sky. Might be 100% right. Could be 100% right. But then you also want to think about what the water's doing, the time of the year, and the type of lake you're fishing. You add 1 or 2 more criteria to it, and you won't just move out to deep water. You'll move out to deep water that's the right type of deep water you should be moving out to. The answers become more clear to you. The answers become more clear. You're not any smarter fisherman. You don't have any more knowledge about the game. You're simply using what you have. And your curve in learning about fishing, whether you're learning to bass fish or learning to walleye fish or learning to musky fish or whatever you're learning how to do, your curve happens really, really quickly because when you start with no knowledge at all, everything you learn is brand new. I could tell you a lot of things, like my little rules of thumb in fishing, And a lot of you go, wow, I never thought about that. That's a good idea. Most of the rest of you go, I know that. I know that. That's why I think the same way, you know. But when you don't know anything, everything you hear is a good answer. But you have to know how to use that. And the big deal in making those decisions is make sure you think about all four of those things. That's why I say you ought to write it down in your tackle box. I mean, I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's not silly at all. Because you think about it and you think, oh, yeah, I know what we ought to do. We ought to move out to deep water. We ought to find some brush that's in shallow water, that's shallow water's falling off to deep water, and we ought to throw a jig or a plastic worm in it. And you think about, well, you know, we're fishing a natural lake. A little harder to find those drop-offs. So you know, but I know something about natural lakes, so you add that in there, and you make better decisions. You end up stopping your boat in better places. And honestly and truly, the key to being a really, really, really good fisherman is to stop your dang boat where the fish are. You stop your boat where the fish are, you're going to be a better fisherman than anybody's. Because if they ain't there, I don't care if you're Roland Martin and Bill Dance and Hank Parker. If they ain't there, you ain't going to catch them. It just don't happen. It just don't happen. And, you know, we've had two fishermen that dominated their respective deal in men and women fishing. Roland dominated, obviously, in bass fishing. He won 9 BASS Angler of the Year titles. Nine. I think Kevin Van Dam won 6. That's the closest anybody's ever been to it. My wife won 7 Basset Gal Angler of the Year titles in Basset Gal. And I think another girl won 3 or 4, the closest ever been to that. And the key things that those people know how to do is stop their boat where the fish are. I mean, that's really the big deal. But you do that by the decisions you make. And you can do it wrong as well. And one of the things that we do, and that's why you put that time of the year in there. One of the things we do when we go fishing so much of the time is we've got some places on that lake, whatever that lake may be. Maybe your lake is right here in town. But you have a tendency to go back to the places where you caught them before. Everybody do that? Everybody pretty much does that. But if you caught them there in July and you go there right now, it's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to work. So that's that time of the year type deal. And that's how we make the wrong decisions a lot. Or we're driving down the lake and we look over and we see a bank and say, boy, that bank really looks good. We'll put in there and fish it. We go down through there 400 or 500 yards, a half mile or so, we don't get a bite. Well, it sure looked good. I can't believe I didn't catch them here. And it might be a bank that your buddy whacked them on 6 months ago on that bank, but totally different time of the year. You see what I'm talking about? But if you will make your decisions based on those situations right there, you will automatically become a better bass fisherman, automatically become a better crappie fisherman or walleye fisherman or whatever you're trying to catch out there, because you'll be stopping your bait a whole lot more often in places where the fish are. And that's really the key to the whole thing. Now, there's a lot of things involved in fishing that's going to cause you to be a better fisherman or not quite as good fisherman or whatever. And you know, 2 people can be in the same boat, one of them whacking them and the other person not catching them hardly at all. And a lot of that is individual skills of what you're doing or the type of bait you're fishing with or the technique you're using, or it might be something you're just not very good at, and so you're just not fooling the fish with that particular bait or technique. It might be something that they are good at. Or you might be fishing with a lady. Ladies catch fish easier than men. And honestly, I mean, that's just the way it is. Guys just suck it up. That's the way it is. That's just a fact. It's a biological fact. It's not, I make this up because my wife won more Angler of the Year titles than I did. I mean, and let me tell you why it is. And I learned this when I was like 11 or 12 years old. Girls smell better than boys. Girls smell better than boys. They do. And nobody in here argue with that. Nobody argue with that. But it's true. And one of the things that's key to fish is a sense of smell. You know, we get baits that's got sense built into them. We spray stuff on them. We dip them in stuff. We rub paste on them. All kinds of things to make them smell good to the fish. But honestly, you know, because all of my life in tournament fishing, I've heard of that Chris could catch fish better than I did and was a better fisherman. And I thought, why argue with that? You know, I'm selling the boats anyway. She wins, so it don't make any difference. But our bodies produce a chemical called L-serine. Y'all heard of that? L-serine. That is a negative, offensive odor to fish. And they've proven that a lot of times. You know, up in this part of the country, like in Michigan, and I think it might do it here too, where those salmon come up the rivers to lay eggs and reproduce, and then they die. They come up the rivers, and they got those ladders built around, like Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's got ladders they built the ladders for those salmon to be able to go up, so they could go up a dam wall that's that size, that wall right there, that maybe halfway up. They can jump. They have a hard time jumping over it. So what they do there in Grand Rapids and a lot of places up here is they build ladders for them. So they got an area where the water's coming down the river. They get in that area, and they can jump up to the next level, and then jump to another level, and pretty soon they're up in the river and going up and spawn. But they've taken deals where those fish are in that ladder, and there's to be a certain part of the ladder. Somebody go over there and just stick their hand down in the water, where the scent's coming off of your hand down in the water. And if the salmon quit jumping up that ladder, they jump the ladder on both sides. L-serine. And it is a biological fact that women produce less L-serine in their bodies than men. So when your wife beats you in fishing, take that one to the bank, guys. Just take it to the bank right there. And the other part of the deal, my wife's a Cherokee Indian, and I don't know if y'all have any Indians up here in this part of the country, but you young guys that want to find a woman, marry an Indian. They come with benefits. Our Indians in Oklahoma got casinos. They have lots of benefits, I'm telling you. I didn't know that when I married mine. She didn't have that many benefits other than she's good looking. I thought that's pretty cool. I like all the benefits she's got right now. Free medical care, free medicine, free. They got those casinos. They're rolling in money. We got state-of-the-art hospitals in Oklahoma that are Indian hospitals. Doesn't cost nothing to go there. Cost me, I'm pale-faced, but Indians go 100% free. Now that's the kind of woman you boys want to marry. Think about that. Get you one that's got benefits. We got, state-of-the-art hospitals, $400 or $500 million hospitals. Unbelievable. They're building a new children's hospital right there in the town where I live. Just a big $300-400 million children's hospital. And it's amazing. And they already picked out the name for it. They call it small engine repair. And I apologize for that one, guys. My preacher told me that one. I jumped in it, hook, line, and sinker. I told him, I said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for telling a story like that. But darker skinned people produce less L-serine than lighter skinned people. So Indians, of course, are a little darker skinned. They produce less L-serine. So that is a fact. That's one of the reasons why, we handle our lures with our hands. We're putting our human scent on there. We spray something on there that smells like a crawfish or a night crawler or a shiner or whatever, or garlic. Yeah, why do you spray? Anybody ever spray garlic on a bait? A garlic spray? Anybody do that? Yeah, garlic works great. It's great. What in the world swims around in the lake that smells like garlic? Pizzas or something? Bread, spaghetti? I don't know what the deal is. Maybe originally bass come from Italy. I don't know. But garlic is a good scent to use. It's a good scent to use. But so that's why we do that, is because those fish have a keen sense of smell. And I have a belief, honestly, and I've never seen them tested, but I have a belief that the better tournament fishermen probably produce less L-serine in their body than Gary Cotton. I'm going to tell a fish story. Thought it might be Roland or Bill. I'd let them say hi to you if it was. I talked to Roland yesterday. Roland Martin, he guides on the headwaters down there in Florida. And the headwaters is a great place to fish. And I talked to him the day before yesterday. And the reason I called him is because he hadn't sent me any pictures of any 10-pound bass that he's caught this year. And he guides, so he counts it. He catches it even if his guide party catches, but that ain't right. He didn't catch them. But he counts it as the one he caught, over 10 pounds. And so I caught one off my dock there in Oklahoma last Friday that weighed 9 pounds and 6 ounces. I weighed it. And he hadn't sent me any pictures lately, so I'm thinking he probably ain't caught a 10-pounder. So I was going to call and brag a little bit, come on. And so I called him and I said, are they biting at the headwaters? He said, oh, yeah. He said, we had a pretty good day yesterday numbers-wise, but we couldn't catch any big ones. He said, we just number-wise. I said, how many did you catch? He said, we caught 70. I said, you caught 70 bass. I said, wow, that's a great day, even if they're all small. He said, well, he said, they were. He said, we had maybe only 5 fish over 5 pounds, maybe 6. I said, well, that's not too bad. And he said, oh, the biggest only weighed like 6 pounds, 2 ounces. And I'm going, and he said, but we probably had another 20 or 25 that weighed 4 pounds or so. And I'm going, Roland, those people that you guided probably had the best fishing day they'd ever had in their life. And you're making excuses about it. Now, he is fishing with minnows. He's fishing with shiners. So he's cheating. I mean, that ain't real fishing. I ain't going to tell you what kind of fishing that is because you can't say that anymore. But you know, he's fishing with shiners. But that's like an incredible day fishing. And so then I popped a question to him, caught any over 10 pounds lately? He said, I ain't caught a single fish over 10 pounds. I said, really, caught any over 9 pounds? And he said, no. He said, biggest I caught was like 8.4. I said, well, I caught a 9.6 off the dock. And Roland's been to my house a lot. So, and he said, off the dock, you caught a 9.6? I said, yes, I did. He said, you weigh it? And I said, of course I weighed it. If I hadn't weighed it, I'd told you it was 10.6 or 11.6. I don't know. But anyway. But I believe that the better tournament fishermen probably produce less L-serine in their body. They have sort of a built-in advantage. So, and that's really a biological deal. It's not just sounds like a funny story, but it's not. It's a true deal. And that's why using scent on your bait helps. And it helps some people better than it does other people, obviously. Because if your body produces a lot of L-serine, you have a little just built-in negative deal, just a built-in negative. And men do produce more L-serine in their body than women. But like I said, I learned it when I was about 12 years old. Those girls smell a lot better than guys do. They really do. And it's been that way all my life. Does anybody have a fishing question? We've been talking about what we had on the schedule. I'll try to cover that as good as I can.
I got one for you, kind of a situational thing. You were talking about stopping a place looking really good. What's your method of breaking down someplace like the Mississippi River that the whole...
It all looks good.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's one of the problems. The question was, how do you break something down like the Mississippi River? And you got a guy that's going to give a seminar, a gentleman was up here earlier that's going to really tell you about that. I have fished that Mississippi quite a bit. And I fished it clear down around St. Louis, and I fished it all the way up at La Crosse, Wisconsin. You know, I've had some really good tournaments in BASS and FLW both on that Mississippi River up in Wisconsin. It's really, really good. From Minneapolis on up is just incredible. I mean, Roland and I have done some shows together in there. But one of the key things when you have a situation, you have the same problem when you get in Florida. You get in Florida and all of those lakes everywhere looks like there ought to be a bass there. You have the same problem in a lot of lakes you have up here, like Leech Lake in Minnesota, and the lakes you have where there's so much good looking stuff. So what you have to do in that type of situation is you have to figure out what type of structure those fish are using more than anything else. That Mississippi River rocks is about as good as anything once you get further north in it. And but you have to figure out what type of structure that those fish are on. And so generally, once you catch a fish or two, if you'll pay a whole lot of attention to the type of structure and the type of vegetation. We go to Florida, there's all different kinds of vegetation. When we started fishing it when I was a kid in tournaments, we didn't know what that stuff was called. What's that grass called? What's that stuff growing up there called, you know? And it's pepper grass. Pepper grass. Why is it hot or what? Why is it called pepper grass? But pepper grass. Well, and you fish pepper grass differently than you do Illinois pondweed, which is in Illinois pondweed we call duck grass is what we call it in the South. But it's Illinois pondweed, probably what y'all call it up here is Illinois pondweed. You fish coontail moss a little bit different than you do hydrilla. You fish reeds, you fish lily pads, and you fish lily pads different when they're dead or when they're alive. Dead lily pads is a great place to catch fish. I didn't watch the deal, but they had a tournament at Guntersville Lake in Alabama just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I talked to a buddy of mine, and he's watched it, and he was telling me all these giant stringers they caught. And I told him, I said, I bet they caught them out in the middle of the lake, following schools of gizzard shad around the middle of the lake, and catch them probably with crankbaits or something in the middle of the lake. Well, they didn't. They caught them all in a foot to 2 foot of water. And he said the announcers are talking about it. They can't believe it. February, this is like February 10th or something, a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago. And they caught them all in a foot or so of water, mostly on lipless crankbaits, which lipless crankbaits is what we throw down there a lot at this time of the year in that particular area. But they were in dead duck grass. It's what they were fishing in. And that's what those fish were up in. Now, why? I'm not really sure. I don't really know. But like on that river, you know, once you figure out, and the further north you go, the greater your smallmouth population gets. And you go south, the less in fact, you don't have any smallmouth. You're going further down south. In the same Mississippi River, you don't have them. They're just not down there. But that river changes dramatically, even though it's still the Mississippi River. I've got a river that runs by my ranch called the Washita River, spelled with a W. They have a Washita in Arkansas spelled with a Q, Q-U-A. Arkansas, most of them, you know, they're married to their cousins. They ain't been to school. And anybody in here from Arkansas? Yeah. Okay, yeah. You go to a family reunion to pick up chicks, you know. I mean, that's it. Family reunion. Yeah. And, you know, if you marry your cousin, you know, keep it in the family. Stuff like that. That's Arkansas, you know. But anyway, we got a river that runs around my ranch in southern Oklahoma. I fished it as a little kid growing up, way before we owned that ranch down there. And it's a dirty, muddy river, kind of about the color of your shirt right there, you know. Tremendous catfishing. It actually runs into Lake Texoma, which is on the Oklahoma-Texas border. But that Washita River starts up in Texas, not too far above Oklahoma. And I was up there turkey hunting on a guy's place one time, had about a 20,000-acre ranch. And I was telling him about this beautiful creek that I found up there where I was turkey hunting. I said, it's beautiful. It's got beautiful rocks in it. The water's flowing through there. And I said, it's like real clear and pretty. It's just a beautiful creek. And he said, Jimmy, that's a river. That's not a creek. I said, well, in Texas, you might call that a river, but in Oklahoma, we call it a creek, you know. And so, you know, so he said, no, it's a river. And I said, how can it be a river? It's just a creek. He said, it starts on this ranch. And I actually have a creek on my ranch. It comes up out of the ground and starts there also. And it runs a long way. And it runs, you know, I've got a lake built on that creek, and it runs out, and it ends up going into that Washita River. But that Washita, and it's spelled with a W, W-A-C-H-I-T-A. And that river, from the time it starts up here in Texas, comes out of the ground, it's a beautiful creek. Like, you go up to La Crosse, Wisconsin, and the river is gorgeous up there. As it moves further south and it runs through all that farmland, it becomes pretty muddy as it gets on down there, to, you know, into Memphis and things like that. But that Washita River, I fished it when I was a kid, catfishing, walking that river and catching catfish. And it's still a great catfishing lake. But you'd fish that river totally different up there in Wisconsin as you would down in St. Louis. I mean, it's a totally different deal. But one of the key is the structure, I think, when you get in those rivers, or any lake, or any place you get into where everything looks good. And that's the problem we had when we went to Florida when I was a kid. We started fishing tournaments down there. You know, I was 24, 25 years old, and it looked like there ought to be a bass everywhere. And there wasn't. But the key is finding the structure that they're using at that particular time. And it might be something like early in the year, dead lily pads. And you might find an area that's got a bunch of dead lily pads in it, and you may have to go 10, 12 miles up the river to find any more like that. You know that. I mean, you go and find a lot of places. But that guy that's doing that seminar on the Mississippi River, ask him that same question this afternoon, because he'll probably have some really good answers for you. But we fish a lot of places where it looks like you ought to catch them everywhere. In fact, sometimes I throw in a spot and I think I ought to catch 2 or 3 in that spot. It looks so good, you know. And the key also in using a deal of, like I was talking to you about the criteria you make decisions on, is the places that you don't want to stop and fish also. And it's just like that good bank that you caught them on last July. Well, man, I whacked them on that bank. We didn't pull over and fish that bank. 200-300 yards later, you ain't had a bite. And if you'd have just thought about it a little bit at the time of the year, and you'll probably have some reasons why they're not on that particular bank. They're not on that shoreline at all. So that's a good question too, by the way. Somebody have another question about anything? Yes, sir.
What's your time limit on, you're using a lure, you're not catching them, so you need to switch? Do you have a certain time?
That's a good question. I've been asked that a lot. You have a time limit on how long you use a lure and you fish with it and you switch to something else. I don't have a time limit that I fish with it and do something else. And normally when I was tournament fishing, and I fished tournaments for 54 years, when I was tournament fishing, I'd usually have 6 rods laying up there or 8 on the front of the boat with spinnerbait tied on about 3 of them and then other baits tied on the other 5 of them. And but I use a bait dependent upon the structure and what I'm throwing at. I might pick a bait up and make 5 casts with it and not pick that bait up for another hour or 2, depending on what I'm fishing, the spot I'm fishing. And we used to have in bass, they used to have I can't remember what they called them, a super bass or something, but you fish for 3 days at a lake, and then the top 10 would fish a 10-hole deal. The bass did that. And I finished 3rd in 2 of them back-to-back years. One down in Texas at White Bluff Lake or something. They moved us from a lake where we were catching 25-pound limits every day to a lake where you couldn't hardly get a bite in town, no. And you fished 10 holes. Another one was on Lake Murray in South Carolina. I finished 3rd place in 2 years in a row, both of them. I won like $30,000 in each of them. But in one of those holes, on Murray, they had a big creek area that they made off limits. We couldn't fish it during the tournament. And then we had holes that we fished, 5 holes on one side, 5, then you go up the creek, down a hole, you get a hole number 3, then you go 4, 5, and then next day they'd reverse it. So you was doing a different deal. So you're fishing different holes at different times of the day and everything. And in that tournament, I caught 100 pounds in the 4 days of the tournament. They cut back to the top 20. They did everybody fish for 3 days, then they cut back to the top 20. Then the top 10 got to fish that final day. During that tournament, I was catching 25-pound limits every day. I mean, I was just whacking them. And I was catching them on a red Cordell rattling hotspot, lipless crankbait. And I had a pattern that was just so dead on, it was amazing. And I mean, I was whacking them. I was whacking them every day. So we're fishing the same lake. We didn't move lakes like we did in Texas. Moved from a really good lake to a really bad lake in Texas. Same lake, just a place that nobody had fished. Well, obviously, I got me about 3 of them red lipless crankbaits tied on, and I run out there and go to there fishing. 10 people fishing. After the first day of that tournament, I was in 9th place. 9th place. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, and I kept thinking, the next hole, I'll catch them on this red crankbait. The next hole, I'll catch them in there. And I never did. So I get back in that evening, I'm in 9th place, and Chris said, dang, I expect you to catch another 25 pounds today. I said, well, I was too, but it didn't happen. And so she got to ask me questions about the type of water we were fishing. And I explained to her something about the first hole I was in. And she said, did you fish any jigs around the docks in that spot? You talk about all those docks there. I said, no, I throwed my red hot spot around those docks. She said, you didn't pitch any jigs? You didn't flip any jigs around them? And I said, no. And so as I explained each hole to her, she hadn't even been in that water. She told me, asking if I did something because of basically you might say the lay of the land, because of the hole. And I'd say, no, I didn't do that. I mean, what I did most of the day was throw that stinking red crankbait. I mean, I didn't caught 100 pounds on it in 4 days. And so she said, I don't know anything about fishing those hole tournaments like you had. But to me, it seems like you ought to just fish whatever's in front of you with whatever you know you ought to be fishing it with. I go out there the next day and catch the biggest string in the tournament. Got beat by 1 pound. Moved all the way from 9th to 3rd. Thought I had it won, actually. Thought I had the doggone thing won. And everybody thought I had it won when I come in. And I caught like 2 off a bed on a tube. I caught 2 big ones on a buzzbait. I caught a couple on them docks on a jig like she's talking about. But I just fished. So I guess the answer would be that it just depends on what you're fishing. And don't be afraid to, I mean, if you see a spot and you're fishing a bait that you caught a bunch of fish on that day and you don't catch them on it, so try something else in there. I mean, fish whatever is available to you with whatever bait you think you should be throwing at the time. And I won 2 BASS Angler of the Year titles in bass, and that's all, just 2. But both times, I probably during the course of that year caught 60 to 70% of all the bass that I laid on those scales on a spinnerbait. So, you know, I'm bad about throwing a spinnerbait a lot when I should be throwing something else, to be honest with you. But use whatever is in front of you that you think you should be using, as opposed to whatever maybe you've been catching them all day on a certain bait and you get in a spot you won't. Have baits sitting on the front of your boat that will work with whatever you encounter as you fish throughout your day. And then use what you think is best in that situation. Make your decisions from that, as opposed to, all right, I'm going to fish a spinnerbait for an hour, I'm going to fish a crankbait for an hour, which is the question you ask. But that's the way. And actually, from that time on, that tournament on, I've become a lot better. And we fished that the following year. We fished that deal the following year. I got third place again, and I zeroed the first day of the tournament. But it was so bad. I mean, the tournament was so bad. It was just terrible. And we've been catching 25 pounds out on Richland Chambers Lake, and we go into town and fish that little lake in the middle of Dallas. They had it because you could walk all the way around. It had like a running trail all the way around the bank. So everybody could come out and watch us fish in Dallas. Big crowds out there. And you know, and I caught quite a few fish, but I caught a lot of them and just wouldn't quite measure. It had a 14-inch minimum, and a lot of them just wouldn't quite touch. I ended up getting beat by 12 ounces. Two guys that won one guy won. Two guys that was tied for first after 2 days. The 2 days of the tournament, Saturday and Sunday, they were 8 ounces ahead of me, and they were tied. And they had a sudden death fish off. And Chris said, "Are we going to stay and watch the fish off?" And I said, "They might be here a week before either one of them catches one. We're going to watch the fish off." And they went out there, and some cat catches one in 20 minutes. You know, it was big enough to keep. But fish the water that's in front of you, whatever you're fishing. And I believe also one way to really become a better fisherman is to learn how to use a lot of baits. Everybody's got your favorite bait. I mean, it don't matter who you are. I like to throw a crankbait. I like to throw a plastic worm, a jig, a buzzbait, whatever. You got baits that are your favorite to throw. And you become better at fishing those baits than you do any other bait, because it's like a spinnerbait. I'd rather not catch them on a spinnerbait than not catch them on something else. So if I'm not catching very many, I'll just take that spinnerbait and throw it. And that's when I start fishing for big ones. Because if I'm not going to catch any, I'd rather not catch big ones than not catch small ones. So, you know, so put your big spinnerbait on, you know. If I use that big spinnerbait, I'm not catching big ones. Some little ones, I ain't looking at it. I'm not catching big ones. You catch anything on it? No, but if I catch one, it's going to be a big one, okay? So, but the one thing I think you do to become a better fisherman also is when you go fishing, you're going to fish the baits that you like more than anything else. That's just what fishermen do. And no matter what that is. Try to find something that you don't have much confidence in. Try to find something you don't have much skill in, so it's hard for you to fish. You don't hardly ever catch a fish on it. And fish with it for 30 or 40 minutes or an hour to try to get better at it. And once you catch a fish or two, you've got a little more confidence in the bait, got a little more confidence in the fact you know how to work it and fish it correctly. And you will become a better fisherman, because you'll hit another situation, and you might fish that bait, never caught a dang fish on it. And then all of a sudden you fish it and you catch a couple. And then you encounter something later that day or next week or 2 months from now that's sort of the same. You say, I remember catching that on that crankbait, that deep diving crankbait, or that square bill crankbait. That's about the same type area. Take that deep diving crankbait and you throw it in there and catch them. So, and you go, and you might not have done it had you not learned to have some confidence in that bait. I've heard fishermen say all my life that the number one bait in your tackle box is confidence. Confidence. I think I'm going to catch one every cast. I ain't never caught one every cast. I've had some times where I caught them 20 or 30 casts in a row, but you know, you're not ever going to catch them every cast. But I think I'm going to catch one every cast. I believe I'm going to catch one every cast. There's a lot to be said about confidence. And I'm a redneck, and rednecks have wild imaginations, wild imaginations. You know, I'm a big Bible reader, but my favorite verse in the Bible, and I get asked about it all the time, is Ephesians 3:20. And it says, and it's like a favorite one for a redneck, because rednecks have vivid, wild imaginations. I mean, I can see a big bass grabbing that bait down there, crawling on the bottom, or going over a suspended fish. I can just see it in my mind. Before we can see it on our locator, I can see that happening. I can see that crankbait hitting the deal and stopping and bumping up and wiggling just a little bit. I can see that in my mind. I'm looking at that all the time. Ephesians 3:20 says that God has the power to do increasingly abundantly more than you can ever ask or think of. And I thought, wow, how good can it get? God has the power beyond my wildest imagination. Beyond my wildest imagination to do that. Has the power to do increasingly, abundantly, more than you can ever ask. We ask God for a lot, or think of. That's your imagination. He's got the power to do that, beyond our wildest imagination. He's got the power to do that. And so confidence is a big deal when you're fishing. You know, believe you're going to catch a fish every time you throw that bait out there. Every time you fish a minnow on a bobber, when you throw that thing out there, you think that bobber's going to go under. You're watching that bobber, waiting for that bobber to go under. And that's an important part of fishing. And the more you know about it, we talk about those criteria and stuff, the better you're going to become, and the more often that you will throw that bait out there and it comes back in with the fish hanging on it. Yeah, important deal. Anybody got another question? Yes, sir.
What's your approach to really heavily pressured water?
What's my most heavily what?
Heavily pressured water. How do you approach it?
Well, for the most part, if you're fishing, the question was about heavily pressured water. And we fish, if you tournament fish, you definitely fish heavily pressured water, because now they cut the tournaments back now where there's not many fishing at the top level. BASS allows 100 to fish. Major League Fishing, FLW allows, well, they were allowing 80. I think they cut it back. I don't know how many, it's like, I don't know how many, 50 or 60. So at the very top, and there's another organization, I don't know how many they let in, 100 or 200 or something. But at the very top level, there's not many people. But when you put, like in BASS for years, we had 300 people fishing the tournament. So you had 150 boats out there anytime. In practice, you had 300 boats out there in practice. You get down to the tournament after 3 days practice, you had 150. So you're fishing heavily fished water all the time. You're fishing it all the time. What I try to do in that situation is I don't want to necessarily be doing what everybody else is doing. I want to do it. So if I figure that the best patterns will be, well, you think of any patterns, running from point to point, fishing points. You think that, all right, the fish ought to be located on points. Maybe you're in a pre-spawn area or pre-spawn stage or something like that. So the majority of the fish might be on points. Well, everybody knows that. All those other guys are just as good as you are. They got all kinds of knowledge, some of them more, some of them less. But so the majority of the people are going to be fishing that pattern. I will try to find develop the second or third best pattern that I can use, as opposed to the pattern that really should be working. Now that will bite you in the butt occasionally too, because you're not fishing, like if you just showed up that lake, put your Ranger boat in, went fishing, you go and you think, okay, the fish are pre-staging, getting up on them points in 5 or 6 foot of water. All I need to do is just go from point to point to point, throw a jerk bait in there, break it down, stop it, throw a crankbait in there, stop it, throw a spinner bait in there, slow roll it, go point to point to point to point. At the end of the day, I'm going to have to catch quite a few fish. But now if you got everybody else doing that, they've already caught a lot of them. The point you pull up to, maybe somebody was there 10 minutes ago, caught whatever's on that point. So you go to what you think is the second or third or fourth best patterns. And so you don't fish really what you think is the right thing to be fishing, because most everybody else is doing that also. Fishermen have a tendency to check fishing reports and to call buddies about certain lakes. The pros do it just like everybody else does. And you find certain colors. If they tell you, they're biting a crawfish-colored crankbait right now. I mean, that's what you want to be throwing. Well, if everybody that's fishing that lake's throwing a crawfish-colored crankbait, you put on something a different color, you're probably going to have more success at it, because the bass are seeing all those crawfish-colored crankbaits. The reason everybody's catching them on a crawfish crankbait? How'd you do yesterday? I did pretty good, caught them on a crawfish-colored crankbait. Okay, I better tie me one of those on. So pretty soon everybody's they can't bite nothing else, and that happens in local waters a lot. We fish a lot of lakes in tournaments that are heavily pressured. We heavily pressure them ourselves in 3 days of practice. These cats are really, really, really good. I mean, they figure out a lot of stuff. And but find you a pattern that is kind of off of the beaten path. That's not the easiest one that you figure to catch fish on. And in tournament fishing, we started tournament fishing. In the South, we was allowed 15 bass a day. So you had to catch quite, and the fishing wasn't near as good as it is now. It's a lot easier to catch fish now than it was when we started years ago. And you had to catch 15 for a limit. And that was pretty hard to catch 15 bass a day. And the lakes have got a lot more fish in them now. They're a lot better lakes. But then we cut down to a 10 fish limit and then to 8 and 7. Now they fish mostly on 5 fish limits. So do something that is the second or third best pattern, and because it'll be successful if you're tournament fishing. You only need to catch 5 anyway. They need to be the right 5. And quite often, the right 5 are not on the best pattern to fish. The pattern you fish to catch a lot of fish. And one of the things, do y'all ever watch these tournament fishing shows like Major League Fishing and BASS? You know, Major League Fishing took a different approach to it. I don't agree with it, but it's a different approach. They took a different approach where you catch as many as you can. You weigh them, throw them back, count them. So if you catch 20 or 30 bass, you count them all. Count them all. Whereas you're fishing in BASS, like when we started, if you catch 20, you keep the biggest 15, whatever. And you don't count them all. You just count, and now 5. You can't count the biggest 5. So you fish differently because of that. But that's what I do on highly pressured lake. I mean, and you can, if you live on a lake and you've got a particular spot around close by where you live, and you look out there and you see a boat on it 3 times or 4 times during the day, it's what we call a community hole. And you go out there and you probably have caught fish off that place yourself. Because for one thing, if you saw boats out there a couple, 2 or 3 times, you go, I wonder what they're fishing. Might be a brush pile or something out there. I need to go out there and fish that spot. But those type places that fall within the good patterns get fished a lot. And if you're going to tournament fish, you want to look for something that's a little different. I cut my teeth on Lake Tenkiller fishing in the middle of the lake, fishing deep. When we started fishing BASS tournaments, I fished the second one they ever had at Eufaula, Alabama, second or third. They had Beaver Lake in Oklahoma and in Arkansas, and then they fished either Eufaula or Smith Lake in Alabama. I don't know whichever one Eufaula was second or third. And I went down there and I didn't know how to fish shallow like a lot of people were fishing. I knew how to fish deep, and it just so happened that was where all the fish were down there. And I found these spots out in the middle. And the first day I didn't catch 15 bass. Another guy caught 15 that weighed 43 pounds. 43 pounds, 15 fish. I caught 11 that weighed 52 pounds and 8 ounces. I had an 8-pound 10-ounce, an 8-pound 14-ounce, and a 9-pound 3-ounce. At the time, the biggest bass I'd ever caught in my life, 9-pound 3-ounce. But the 814, I think, was the biggest bass I'd ever caught in my life. I had my line broken 3 times that day. I should have had another 20 or 25 pounds. But I was catching them in the middle of the lake because nobody's fishing in the middle of the lake. And I didn't understand all that back then. I just knew how to fish in the middle of the lake. And that lake's got a lot of contour, a lot of structure on the bottom. And so I found 2 spots in 3 days practice that had a lot of fish on them, and they were big ones. And those fish grew up to be 8 or 9 pounds, and nobody fished for them. Nobody fished for them. Now that tournament changed that. You know, now everybody's fishing out. In fact, the second day of that tournament, I had me about another 10, 15, 18 boats thinking I needed help catching the fish rods, catching them. So they're all out there trying to help me. And the second day of that tournament, we didn't have the locators and the stuff that we have nowadays. We had locators that read down vision, that's it. Not down vision, they're graph. I mean, they're a little red line going across it. But I had a spot that I caught a bunch of those big fish on the first day. They were there early in the morning, and they were just there for a little while, and they were gone. And I had it marked with a little cork about as big as your finger and about that long, a little chartreuse-looking cork with some fishing line tied to it and a rock. And I had that spot marked. And you had to triangulate out in the middle of the lake off of there's a red house over there, and where I line up and get that tree over on that bank and something over on this bank. And we get close to where that little deal is floating around in the middle of that lake. And then you look to where you find it, and then you get in a certain spot, and you anchor your boat, you're fishing your hole. And the second day of that tournament, after catching 52 pounds the first day, second day of that tournament, I went out there and I triangulated out, and there's a boat, another competitor, anchored about 10 yards away from my little bobber. He never saw it. He never ever saw it. But he's about 30 feet away from it. We can't get within 75 feet of another boat that's anchored. So I just anchored off out there about 75 or 80 feet away from him and just fished. I couldn't catch nothing. I mean, it wasn't nothing where I was throwing. But it wasn't anything where he was throwing either, but he didn't know that. He's pretty dang smart to have been able to line that up the day before. And the reason is, like, nobody knew who I was or nothing, but when you weigh in 52 pounds of bass, now everybody knows who you are. And so a lot of people say, I think I see that hippie-looking kid out there with that long hair. So I think I saw him out in the middle of that river fishing. And that's, I mean, boats going by all day long, back and forth all day long. I mean, it's pretty easy to recognize when you get up there with all them big fish, and then everybody thinks they got to help you catch them. And, but he was not on the fish. He was just close to where he saw me sitting the day before. And he fished there about an hour and a half. As soon as he moved, I moved in there on that spot, and I caught 5 bass that weighed 28 pounds the first 10 minutes on that spot. 5 that weighed 28 pounds. I never caught another fish the rest of the day. So, and I ended up getting 6th place in that tournament. I didn't win the tournament. But I had one other spot that I was catching them on that I caught a couple big ones on the first day. That the third day I caught a couple 2.5 or 3 pounders off of it. That's all I caught. I mean, but I didn't have, I started fishing tournaments in '66 when I was a senior in college. And that was '68, 2 years later. And I had not had hardly any experience at 3-day tournaments. My tournaments have mostly been 1-day tournaments that I fish. So you just catch all you can and try to win the tournament. And if it's been a 1-day tournament, I win it, you know. But since it's a 3-day tournament, I didn't. I had to learn. And if I had just known a little bit then, at 22 years old, that I know now, I could have run around in shallow water and caught enough fish to win the dang tournament with that. But I didn't know how to catch them in shallow water. I just didn't know how to do it. So, but that's the way I kind of attack it. But they're just, again, we talk about the criteria, what the water's doing and the type of the lake you're fishing. And it works. It don't matter where you are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a lake that's got a lot of fish on it or a lake that doesn't have many fish on it. It doesn't matter what time of the year it is, because that's one of the ways you're making a decision. It doesn't matter whether the lake's flooded or 20 foot low. Again, because it's what the water's doing. So you're making all your decisions. You will scare yourself if you will use that philosophy in making decisions about bass fishing. You will figure out something and you'll start that boat up and pull it over and fish a spot. This works. And you throw out there and you catch one and you go, oh my God, this worked. Because it does, and it will. And it'll work over and over and over again. And you won't always make the right decisions. If you make all the right decisions, you become Roland Martin or Kevin Van Dam or somebody like that wins a lot, you know. But you'll make the right decisions more often than not. And it don't matter what you're doing in life. If you make the right decisions more often than not, you're going to be pretty successful at what you're doing. You know, one of the things that we tell kids a lot, son, this is going to be a bad deal. You made a wrong decision here. And this decision is going to be pretty painful for you and me both. But you made a bad decision. And then those kids come to you when you're taking them out fishing, they're grandkids. And they say, Granddad, we're making some bad decisions today. And don't tell your mama. Don't tell your mama what we did, okay? And they run and tell them anyway. You know, so, but yeah.
So I know you've caught a lot of fish. I know
Not enough.
You've kissed a lot of bass. If a bass could talk, what would they say about you?
Well, they'd say I'm a fantastic kisser. I have references. Yeah. I don't know how we got started at kissing fish, you know, but I don't know how, we didn't realize we was doing it, but we got kind of the whole world kissing fish. It's kind of amazing. I got a picture one time about 25, 30 years ago from Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, kissing a fish. A picture of him kissing a fish. Didn't have his shirt on, kissing a fish, you know. And I thought, that was before, you know, I mean, turned into what kind of a man he is today. And I always thought he couldn't be all that bad if he likes to fish and hunt. But But he's pretty bad. He's done a lot of pretty atrocious things in his lifetime. I don't know him. I haven't colluded with him. I don't know anything about him. But I do have a picture of him. And the fish this tells you he's not super intelligent. The fish he was catching looked like a northern pike. I think that's what it was. They have teeth that will break off in your lips. Do not kiss northern pike.
Is that from experience?
It's from experience, but not from kissing one. The first time I ever really was too involved with a northern pike, I caught a big one on spinnerbait. Maybe like 30 inches. A big one, and big old, and had big mouth on it, and he lunched my spinnerbait. It's down in his throat, and they got a big mouth. So I'm holding the thing. I get him open, and I'm reaching down there to get that spinnerbait loose in his mouth. And just as I get it unhooked, I don't guess he liked that, because he flopped and got away from me. And he planted them dang teeth, and they broke off in my hand. And then they got infected, and I was fishing a tournament. My hands, I couldn't hardly touch them anywhere. But those teeth will break off, and y'all probably know it because you have a lot of them up here. But those teeth will break off, and they grow back. They break off and they grow, which that happens to our teeth too, up to a certain stage, and it quits happening. But yeah, those teeth had been broke off in my hand, and then they got some sort of poison or something in, I guess, because you don't want to kiss those fish that's got teeth. You just don't want to do that. There's a lot of fish that's not really good to kiss. Catfish aren't that good. They're slimy, they're slimy. I paid my way through college eating catfish. All righty. Somebody have another question?
So you alluded earlier to electronics. What are your thoughts about the new world age of electronics and what's going on with forward-facing sonar? You're one of our elders.
Well, the question is about forward-facing sonar, and we get asked about that everywhere we go. It's a tremendous revelation in fishing, not just tournament fishing, not just bass fishing, but all fishing. Y'all have got one of the most iconic fish in the world up here to catch called a muskie. And they're going to call the fish of 10,000 casts, because for the most of the part of the year, and you catch them when they're in shallow water. I've caught most of the muskie I've caught in my lifetime have been accidentally while I was bass fishing on a spinnerbait in shallow water around boat docks and stuff, and they grab hold of the spinnerbait and the game on. And but a fish like a muskie, that's changed the game on that. I went up and fished Leech Lake a couple of years ago in July, and I caught 5 in 2 days, and I complained about it. I mean, I said, I fished 2 days. I saw quite a few fish. I only caught 5 in 2 days. And you tell that to somebody that has not used forward-facing sonar and has caught 5 muskie the last 25 years. You're bitching because you caught 5 in 2 days. Come on. But it's changed muskie fishing. It's changed catfishing. It's changed crappie fishing. It's changed everything. It's changed fishing in farm ponds that are muddy where you can't see. They're muddy. It's changed fishing in flats where you have stumps in 2 or 3 foot of water, but the water's muddy. And you go up there and you run your trolling motor into the stumps and stuff like that. But now you can take that forward-facing sonar and look out there and see all those stumps. You don't even have to see a fish. If you see a stump with your eyes, you got your Polaroids on, and you can barely see a stump, you're going to throw a bait over there by it and fish that stump. But if you see it with there, you don't have to even see the fish on it. You might not be able to see the fish. Might be laying on the other side of the stump. Might be attached, laying down flat on the stump, whatever. Mostly a bass is suspended. Mostly they have water all the way around them. So they separate themselves from whatever they're on most of the time. Not 100%, but most of the time. But so it's changed fishing dramatically. And it's probably, from a standpoint of good or bad for the industry, it's both. Obviously, it's allowed fishermen to catch a lot of fish they have never been able to catch before, including bass. It's allowed, like in Oklahoma, we have a fish called a spoonbill catfish, paddlefish, and they're algae feeders. They get to be 100 pounds, 120 pounds, eating algae. You don't catch them on catfish bait. Don't catch them on a lure. You snag them. You have to snag them if you're going to catch them. We routinely catch 100-pounders in Oklahoma now. But again, because, they're this big. And a muskie, when you see those muskie, when they're in the middle of the lakes in the summertime here, you get out there and you get on a ledge and you follow a ledge out in the middle of the lake with your GPS on your locator, and you follow that graph down and you see one of them big muskie out there. Then you stop, get your boat position, throw and bring a bait over the top of them and catch them. And you might see 10 or 15 a day and catch 3 or 4 of them, or you might see 10 or 15 a day and catch 8 or 10 of them. But it depends on whether they're biting or not. And we've learned so much about the fish that we did not even fish for. You could go out in the middle of Leech Lake and get on those ledges and throw that muskie bait 10,000 times, never get it close to a muskie. You can do the exact same. We have a similar situation in the South. We do this time of the year, December, January, February, March, before the fish spawn, where those fish will mostly, they get in areas where they're going to go into spawn. They'll be maybe out in 8 or 10 or 15 foot of water, but suspended 4 or 5 foot deep. Or they will be, before that urge starts for them to move into a spawning area, they're out simply suspended over 15 or 20 or 30 foot or 100 foot of water. And they're just swimming around out there. They're just swimming around. And they're mostly down by, and again, we talked about natural lakes, man-made lakes. They're in there, they're doing this in these man-made lakes, and you can go in any lakes in Oklahoma and Texas and Alabama, and Arkansas, anywhere in the South, a man-made lake. You go put your boat in down by the dam. You go up by the dam. There's a dam, big old dam, whatever big it is, and you got points on both sides of it, and then you got a flat down there somewhere usually. Go to those flats, just start driving around looking at your forward-facing sonar. It could be 80 foot deep. Look, oh, there's one 10 foot deep. Throw your bait out there, run it 6 or 7 foot deep. Depending on how clear the water is, 5 foot deep. Bring it by that fish. A lot of times they jump up and grab it. You can go fish those same spots, and you could cast 1,000,000 times, not catch a single fish, because you can't get it right on that fish. Now you can see him on that locator. Now you can see him. You can position it correctly above them. And it's like, I mentioned deer hunting. Several of you raise your hand, you're deer hunting. You could take all the ammunition you can carry, put that in your 308, in your 30-06, in your 7 mag. Walk through the woods shooting till you run out of bullets. And you walk up there where you shot, and there ain't no deer laying there. That's what happens out there in the lake. But we kill the deer because we see them. And that's why you catch those fish. Nobody been fishing for them. Nobody been fishing for them. We have found fish in some of those Texas lakes. And we just figured this out in the last couple of years. We've been using that forward-facing sonar for quite a few years now. 7, 8, 9 years, a long time. But in the last couple of years, we figured out that a lot of the really, really big bass, talking about teenage bass, 13, 14, 15 pounders, 10 pounders, 11 pounders, 12 pounders, are not spawning in March and early April like we thought they were doing. They spawn in May. And they're spawning in it when that water gets really clear in some of those lakes like O.H. Ivy, like Thomas, those lakes like that. And they're spawning 10 or 12 or 14 foot deep because the water's so clear, the sun will still penetrate enough to hatch those eggs out. And we found those fish with those forward-facing sonar, and there'd be 2 of them down there on your door, look like a bed. In May, they're all spawning. They're spawning up here in May, And this is, we're talking about South Texas. And it looks like they're on a bed, except they can't be on a bed. This is May. But you see a big one and a little one. And you fish your bait down there and you catch them. I got a buddy of mine caught a 15 and a 14 last year one day like that. A 15 and a 14. 13-1's the biggest I've ever caught. He catches a 14 to 15 in one day. But he caught them the same way. Now, they're usually in these big, bushy, marley trees. So you get that bait down there, you got to have it on about 80-pound test line. Hope you get them out of there, But it's helped be able to fish for fish we hadn't caught. We've got a couple lakes in Texas that people are now guiding for big catfish on lures, crankbaits. And what are they doing? They find a big catfish, they throw that bait out there and bring it right by his nose till he bites. We're catching those big catfish, a 30, 40, 50-pound catfish around marinas. You go in there and you look around marinas with your scope until you see a big old catfish. They normally are attached to something. But they can lay on something straight up and down and be perfectly comfortable. I don't know how they do it. You see them in aquariums do it, though. You see it. But then you find these big catfish, and you'll see two guys sitting in the front of a bass boat, like in the corner of a boat dock, and they're both sitting there, and they both got a rod out there about that far apart, and they're sitting there with a good catfish bait in front of one of them's nose. And the fish might be asleep, but when he wakes up, there's lunch. And they're catching these 30, 40, 50-pound catfish on rod and reels. And crappie, I'm believing they may have to change some crappie laws around the United States. We got guys that just they're automatic. And we got lakes in Oklahoma, the limit's still 37. The limit's 50 for crappie in Kansas. I mean, it's changed it around. But then the negative part of it is from a tournament standpoint, we've got a lot of younger fishermen. We've had that live scope now since, I don't know what, 16 or 17, 8 or 9, 10 years. We got kids fishing college tournaments that don't know how to fish and winning. All they know to do is video game fishing. They're walking out there. They're all going to walk around when they get to be my age. They're all going to be like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" "Yeah, I fished bass tournaments when I was young." "Yeah, look at that. There's a dime." So they haven't learned how to fish. They haven't learned the things we've been talking about today. And what I fear for that is that fishing when they get out of the competition of it, they get where they don't compete. And most people can't compete. Like I said, there's only a couple hundred people at the top level that play the game. That's all. I mean, nearly every professional sport's got way more than that. And they won't like to go fishing. Fishing will. And obviously it's hurt the lure business. I mean, cats are taking a jig and putting a swim bait on it and fishing, they got it hooked on a spinning rod. It's hurt the rod and reel business. I mean, there's a lot of negative also involved in it. And it has totally wiped out their television ratings. Both bass and Major League Fishing are just crying about nobody's watching their shows anymore. You want to watch some guy up there, and here he's sitting here, and he's got a spinning rod. He's got a spinning rod, and he's got his bait. He don't even have his bait ready to throw. He's got it on his eye like that. He's sitting up there, running around. And then he got it on TV, and pretty soon he goes, he run that trolling motor, and he gets this, gets all ready, he casts out there and catches one. That's just not good television, and they're suffering because of it. And the reason that they're limiting that to those guys fishing out there, that's the reason. That's the reason. They don't. I mean, and they'll not outlaw those things totally because Garmin and Lowrance are big sponsors, and Humminbird, those are big sponsors. We run 250 horsepower Mercuries in tournaments now. We run 150 horsepowers forever. That's all we had. 50 mile an hour, 55 mile an hour, man, that's all you could run. And we wanted them big motors, and Mercury kept building them motors bigger and bigger and bigger, one of them big motors. Finally, Mercury said, we want to sell these guys 250 horsepower motors, not 150 horsepower motors. So when they changed that, and they had that rule because of safety. Ray Scott, the guy that started BASS, he said, we don't let them fish anything more than 150 horsepower. We don't want them running 70, 80 miles an hour down the lake. And you run, if you had a boat really decked out right with a 150, you'd get about 60 mile an hour. Once you loaded everything in there, you dropped it back down to 55. Well, you put a 250 on about anything that'll run 70. And but they put that 250 on there because it makes Mercury a lot more money. And back then we had Evan Root and Johnson as well. But now we got some Mercury, but that's the deal on it. But they sell a lot of forward-facing sonars, and they'll continue to sell them. And but here's what I tell people doing the television show: use that as another tool, just like you use a spinning rod as a tool, a casting rod as a tool. You use a plastic worm as a tool. You use everything, line size, everything we do in fishing is just tools that we're using to help us catch fish and have fun. Don't let that forward-facing sonar stop you from fishing. If you've been out there and you fished 3 or 4 hours and you've made 30 casts, you're screwing yourself. That's just all there is to it. You're taking the fun out of fishing. Don't do that. But it's a great tool. One of the things that Roland taught me years and years ago was to keep the corner of my eye on that fish locator all the time. And the locator's not like what we got nowadays, obviously. You keep your eye on that a quarter of a time where you just sort of are looking at it out of the corner of your eye and you're fishing. Something happens on there, you'll notice something different happening if you really get good at it, and then you see that. But I did a television show here the other day, slow rolling a spinnerbait over deep grass. The grass is back down, the lowest it is right now in most of the lakes in the south, and so you got 1 foot or 2 foot of grass, maybe 8 or 10 foot of water, and those fish are in that grass or above the grass. And so you can slow roll a spinnerbait or run a crankbait over the top of it. Both of them work good. I like slow rolling a spinnerbait. They usually have a good jarring strike, which I like that. And you slow roll it, ticking the top of that grass a little bit with your spinnerbait, and you get in these flats where these fish will stage in areas where they're going to go up to spawn. And you slow roll those spinnerbaits, use white or chartreuse and white, solid white I think works better, and you're slow rolling a spinnerbait over the top of that mullet. That day I caught 14 bass that day. I caught all of them on a white spinnerbait, all slow rolling. 3 of them I saw on a live scope out of the 14. The other 11 I caught was just blind casting, throwing, and I saw a little bunch of fish, had 4 or 5 fish in it, and a couple of them were 5-pounders. And I caught 3 5-pounders that day. One of them was just fishing. Others were the two of those I saw in that scope. And I threw out there and caught them with that scope. So if you use it that way, it's a great tool. And it's fun to catch them. It's fun to see them and catch them. That's fun. But it's both good and bad. It's both good and bad. And they're using saltwater too, you know. But we've always been doing a lot of things to let us do that. I mean, if you see a bunch of seagulls diving down in the water, or you drive by a bank and there's 5 blue herons standing on it, I mean, you know there's bait fish over there because the blue heron fish for a living. They gotta catch something every day or they go hungry. So you see 5 blue herons standing on the bank, you pull over and fish that bank. I noticed a bait fish over there. If there's bait fish over there, there's probably some fish I want to catch over there too. Probably if you just took one thing to know about fishing, if you took just one thing to know about fishing, it's bait fish. And a good philosophy in fishing, there are a lot of rules of thumb that you need to develop in fishing that you use day in and day out every time you go. Like I have rules of thumb, I don't know how many, a bazillion of them maybe, I don't know. But you know, like if it starts raining, most of them are common sense. Most of them are common sense. Common sense, like I mentioned yesterday, you don't want some 6'5" guy on the girls' swimming team, you know. You don't want that. The guy needs to go swim with the guys, not the girls. And, you know, stuff like that. You don't want, that's common sense to me. But common sense, when I was a kid, it'd start raining, and I grew up with tin roofs. And then I've got metal roofs on my house now because I like to hear that rain, you know. But for a long time, we went to those asphalt roofs we had. But I grew up with tin roofs. So when it starts raining, what do you do when you hear on a roof rain on a roof? What do you normally do? As humans, what do? We go look out a window. Well, we know it's raining. We heard the rain on the roof. But it starts raining, you go over and you look out. Oh, well, that rain's coming down out there. Well, of course it's coming down. You hit it, you hear it on the roof. But so I thought, as a kid, if it started raining, a bass would probably look up. Now, does that make sense? Now, that's country boy, redneck, common sense. So what I wanted was a bait that was around the top of the water. And that's how I started fishing the spinnerbait up on top of the water. Because everybody, when we developed these things back when I was in high school, when we developed these spinnerbaits, we made them out of safety pins. And we cut the fastening end off a safety pin and put a jig hook on it and put it in a jig mold. And then the sharp end, we cut the point off of that and put a blade and a split ring and a swivel on it. And that's how we made spinnerbaits. And we used rubber bands. We cut a rubber band and tie them around that jig head and make a spinnerbait, kind of look like a spider or a tarantula spinnerbait. But I thought, if it started raining, the bass is looking up. So you just run a bait over the top of them. The best baits to fish when it's raining, mostly it's a spinnerbait and a buzzbait. Run them on top of the water. I don't know if all those fish are looking up or not, but I'm telling you, that'll work more often than not. It rules of thumb like fish, the heaviest cover you can find close to deep water. I mean, all kinds of rules of thumb that you do. Most of them are just compensates. But once you develop yourself some rules of thumb, and that situation or that element or that weather or that whatever happens, they'll pop right into your mind, and you'll do it, and it'll work. It'll work more often than not. So I know I've probably taken way more than my time, guys. I appreciate y'all being so patient with me. They made a mistake when they tell me I can take all the time I want, you know. So I appreciate everything. We're going to be go right down here and be around the high-tech booth. This is a Jimmy Houston Blaze Series rod. It's a combo rod. They sell for $100 retails. They're not very expensive. The rod is a great rod. And the reel is a $40 casting reel. That's a really, really inexpensive casting reel. I fish with $380 casting reels mostly. I mean, you know, that's but these rods are fantastic. And but the whole outfit's $100. I think they're selling them here at this show for $80. And but they're really they're super. They're super rod and reels. They throw great. If you fish a lot like I do, don't worry, I'm dead accurate with it. I'm more dead than I am accurate, but anyway, the reel throws fantastically well. But if you fish a lot like I do, and you catch thousands of fish in a year, you're going to wear a $40 reel out a lot quicker than you wear a $350 reel out. I promise you that. But you believe that? You believe that accuracy part? I'm just checking. Yeah. By the way, I throw that bait up there close to you like that. We have cut the hook off of that bait. We've cut the hook off of that bait. You don't think, how close did that get to your nose there? Pretty close. You feel the skirt? Skirt touch your nose? Yeah, we cut the hook off of it, so you don't have to worry about that. We forgot to cut the hook off of that one. They don't think I'm going to run a dang good spinnerbait by cutting the hook off, do they? Yeah. I'm going to end this thing just telling you one thing. I have not hooked anybody doing a fishing talk in probably 35 or 40 years. So just think about that a second. That's how safe you are. So if it gets close to your nose, don't worry about it. I hooked a lady down in Abilene, Texas about 35 years ago with a white spinnerbait. That's chartreuse, but white spinnerbait. We were doing a deal. They used to have this deal called Bass Fishing Techniques Institute. We went around the schools, and we had them in colleges. There was an adult education class. It cost $200 to go to that thing. And they'd bring pros in to teach various subjects. And serious people trying to learn about bass fishing, paying $200 to learn. And so we had people, they'd grab notebooks and then take notes and stuff. And I was in a high school, a college auditorium down in Midland, Odessa, Texas. And Midland, Odessa, they say, is the bass capital of the world. They say you can get up and drive 500 miles in any direction and find a place to go bass fishing. And they sell so many boats down there because they all got so much money because of that Permian Basin. Everybody's rich down there. So they got that Ranger boats. Everybody's got a Ranger boat down there. And but anyway, I was doing that seminar, and I was at a little white spinnerbait like that right there, and I was throwing down a little aisle like I'm doing right there, and I was talking, and there was a lady about 6 or 7 rows back that was writing stuff down. She was taking notes. I'd say something to her, she'd make notes of it. She's really trying to learn everything about fishing. And I was throwing that bait back there, and I threw it out, and just as I threw it out there, because I like to throw it out and wind it back in. To me, that's fun. I enjoy throwing that bait out and winding it back in. You learn to enjoy that, you're going to really like bass fishing, because that's pretty much what it is, throwing it out there and winding it back in. So learn to have fun doing that. And I like it. I like to throw it out there and wind it back in. But just as I threw my bait out there, I looked over at a pretty lady or something, and that lady dropped her pencil. So it wasn't really my fault. She bent over to pick that pencil up, and my little white spinnerbait kind of caught her in the ear just a little bit. And I was looking over at another lady, and it caught her in the ear a little bit. I guess it scared her because she jerked her head back. When she did, I set the hook. I mean, You go jerking around on the end of my pole, something's going to happen. I guarantee you that. And this is the best thing I'd had a hold of. I don't know how long. I just kept on winding. And I got her wound up to the front. And the spinnerbait, I got a pretty good hook set, you know. And the spinnerbait had gone all the way through her ear. It was like an earring hanging there. And she didn't put up much of a fight. She didn't put up much of a battle. But anyway, so it had gone all the way through her ear. So we just took a pair of wire pliers. We're in Texas in the oil field areas. People wear them pliers on their belt, you know. Pliers on one side, a gun on the other down there. And I said, anybody got some wire pliers? And somebody had some. We just cut the end of the spinnerbait off and it come right out of her ear. It didn't hardly hurt her at all. And it embarrassed her a lot. And it embarrassed me. I'd never done anything like that. I felt horrible. I probably felt terrible. And but I think it embarrassed her more because the moment I set the hook, some old boy said, talk about catching a hog. That was her husband that hollered that. She was madder at him than she was at me, you know. And I'd have thrown her back anyway. She wanted to keep her, but anyway, it was like it was a terrible deal. It was a terrible deal. But I haven't hooked anybody since, so that's how safe you are. Yeah, the law of averages might be about to catch up with me. You reckon? I don't know. I just tell you one thing though. You know, if that bait was to land in your lap, I would sit very still. I would not make any very fast movements or anything. I just tell you, I got a backlash. That's a whole new category. Putting a trailer on a spinnerbait. That's a whole new deal. We're not talking about. You ever get one of these in your reel? Has this ever happened to anybody? I don't know what this is. I have no idea what this is. I've had this happen before. Y'all ever had that happen to you? Something like that? I had it happen. I had it happen to me last summer, or maybe a year before last. I don't know. It might not have been last summer. I don't know. I wouldn't buy that brand of line. That's perfect. Seminar's over. All right, guys, but I'll be out there in that high-tech booth. We've got some of our spinning rods out there too that I think are about on sale for $60 or something like that. Thank y'all so much for putting up with all my nonsense. I just like to have a lot of fun. All right.